If you took notes in your small group, like jotted them down on your computer or something that you want to go ahead and share that you feel like didn't get captured here, go ahead and send those to me. That would be great. If you feel like just emailing afterwards and sending us your thoughts that way, that would be great too. I think for the most part, at this point, we're just going to spend some time going through all of these great comments that you guys have put in the chat and consolidating them, thinking about them. Definitely we'll be talking with Katie Kennedy a fair amount with an idea towards the grant that she's applying for. King County has looked at also applying for the EPA Swiffer grant. So we might be able to pull some things from this that would be applicable for that in terms of how stuff might be structured. Yes, I will definitely be not closing this out until I have saved the chat. Thank you for that reminder. And yes, we are planning on making the recording available to everyone. Alex, are you there? Do you have any other last thoughts? Are there things I'm forgetting that we need to do to wrap this up?
I don't think so. I know there are several other things people kind of referenced that we will probably share in follow-up emails, some videos and links to people's websites. I think, we heard from 3 different university-related folks who did research on using salvage lumber and mass timber, and there's actually at least 3 other universities out there who've done this. So yeah, we'll follow up with lots more information. And thanks again for being here. And I want to apologize for the weird, inappropriate thing at the beginning on the first set of slides. We've never had that before and didn't know how that happened. But I'm so glad everybody was here. This was really helpful. And yeah, and as Kinley said before, we are going to leave this open for the next hour if folks want to stay and continue.
Yep. And there was a question about how the recording will be going out. In the past, we have posted to a King County Solid Waste Division YouTube page, and then sent the link out to all the participants. So we'll probably be doing it that way. It'll probably take us a week or 2 to get it processed and back out again. But that's how we'll be sending it out. So with that, I think we will officially close the Salvage Lumber Summit. And thanks to everyone for coming today and being a part of this, contributing your ideas. And like Alex said, we're going to be hanging out for the next hour or until everybody gets bored and goes home, so to speak. So go ahead and hang out, and we can, just turn on our mics and chat or continue chatting in the chat. Either way. So, but everyone who wants to jump off now, thank you and take care. So, does anybody have anything they want to talk about?
Some great stuff there, Kinley. Really good stuff.
Yeah, a lot to think about. It's a lot of pieces to figure out how to weave together still.
Yeah. In my breakout group, I was saying how we're dealing with this in 6 different states at the same time, trying to find a facility, and that's been a really limiting factor. We had one lined up right when COVID hit in 2 different states. Actually, we had two places lined up, and or we were beginning to line it up, and then COVID just blew it out of the water. I mean, it just blew those efforts, really pushed them back years, because we had, potential for facilities, and that's a bummer. But yeah, in a couple of different states, I'm thinking of where our efforts are based on getting a local government to provide a space. And, with the understanding that the community would see a benefit back from that. And a couple of locations where private companies are, would provide the space. One of them being a transfer, a C&D processing facility, and one of them being mine. And then in a couple of examples where it was just, let's just rent and let's combine, where everybody, where we have this approach of having 10 different businesses they don't all deal with wood. It's not with the Reuse Innovation Center is not all about wood, but it is a lot about wood because wood is the major component. And so we have a couple of examples where it would just be flat out rented, and and everybody who's currently renting space may decide to co-locate there, and then they wouldn't necessarily be paying any more money. They would just be located with like-minded businesses and work synergistically with them. So we definitely are in the middle of 6 different efforts that have 3 different tentative solutions.
So Dave, do you see much other like business support? Are you partnering with other businesses much, or is it primarily just public entities?
Well, the Reuse Innovation Center is a business partnership, and it is a business cooperative. It's businesses working together, but like we don't. It's not 10 businesses that all do deconstruction, right? It's 3 businesses that do deconstruction and 3 businesses that make things out of reclaimed wood, and then one that does repair work, and one that does, or a couple that do repair work, and one that focuses on recycling and hauling, that sort of thing. And so, like your 1-800-JUNK, but on a small scale, like a mom and pop kind of version of that. And so we have these different groups. They do different things. The idea is to start a nonprofit that will handle the training aspect, the workforce training out of the Reuse Innovation Centers, the different ones, so that we can have a curriculum throughout them and be able to train up train up people in the circular economy, as you would if you were a plumber. Like if you're a plumber, you want to be a plumber and you're not currently, you can get hired somewhere and you can learn on the job, become an apprentice, and there's a whole system for that. And but there isn't really for, I want to learn how to deconstruct buildings. You might be in a community that doesn't have any of that, so you don't know how to learn. You don't know how to start a business yourself. It's not normal for everybody to just start a business. Normally they would work for someone, learn, and then maybe later start a business. So our industry, it's really hard. We're at a point where it's hard to grow because we don't have all the infrastructure that a normal industry would.
Okay. So any other thoughts on how to move this all forward? Jeff?
So first of all, Dave, nice to see you on. And I sent you a private message that next time you're in the Seattle area, I hope you'll look me up so we can get coffee. I'd love to catch up from Nickel Brothers. Second, I've been involved, at least at different levels, in the wood recycling concept for probably a better of 12 to 15 years with Kenley and others. And one of the things that has always been a huge interest for me, for Nickel Brothers, is possibly being able to bring houses in to store them at the recycling center and then partner with other organizations for renovating these houses while they're there and providing an outlet for the wood. And whether it's through finished materials or additions or whatever. And so one critical element to that is access to bargeable offload, both offload and onload. And so even though I know that may be a beggars can't be choosers situation, we had the possibility with Harbor Island, which I know fell through for good political reasons, but if there was some access to water, even if it was across the street from it, for example, if it was along the Duwamish or some other place that has basically outside passage access, then I think that could help for those kinds of partnerships with Nickel Brothers and give a really good wood outlet, as well as potentially for other shippable products, not just things related to Nickel Brothers.
Okay.
I had a thought to share, because there are counties that own a lot of industrial buildings and they don't have a use for it and they're not collecting property taxes on it. The ability for multiple synergistic businesses like Dave was describing to co-locate there as a cooperative that would pay rent to the county on a long-term basis. Because now you have the workforce development space and the land and the ownership and the alignment. And if that county is in a wooded county or a rural county that neighbors, let's say a suburban county that neighbors an urban county, now you have 3 counties involved in the state. And you have some synergies because let's say King County is too urbanized to have the rural solutions. So we can think about it here, but we can't implement it. So we need to have neighboring counties to have the cooperation. And I'm really interested in how USDA really talks about cooperatives as really being part of the package as a missing part. And I'm really interested in exploring that because that distributes the risk and increases the opportunity for the participants.
Yeah, and one thing we brought up in our group around the cooperative opportunity is also the county can engage in social equity and justice to really highlight and, kind of use that innovation center as a way to help, smaller businesses or business owners who, have been excluded or have not had the capital resources to get into these industries. The opportunity to have a much smaller, again, shared risk, opportunity. And to pitch back to Jeff's point with the housing opportunity with them having the houses there, you could build an entire job training program on just, training people to remodel homes or, the training opportunities alone by having a physical house there that you're, working on. Not only from a deconstruction standpoint and like all the, refurbishment you could do with all the materials reclaimed, but just the apprenticeship opportunities of like framing, plumbing, electrical, window, installations. That is also something that, a city or county could put grant dollars towards.
Definitely. I think so.
Yeah, great points.
I'll jump in, Kinley, and
Yeah.
I would say, foundationally, there are some really important things to look at for a program and facility like this. I know that Harbor Island was a well-researched facility and space, but I think we need to have some base numbers, especially in our region. And one is how much wood, either board feet, square feet, cubic feet, tonnage, do we have access to? I consider it a resource rather than are we responsible for. If you look at it as a resource, how much do we have access to? Because then we're talking about scale.
Yep.
No, that's number one. And number two, once we have that number, how much that's from the C&D waste stream, how much do we think we're seeking to pull out of that access line, percentage wise and total cubic feet? And from there, then we know what types, and that's per year, right? And we
Yep.
can spread that across 12 months or 52 weeks. Now we know how much material we're actually going to be receiving and sending out per week. That will tell us what size facility is realistic for us.
Right.
That's number one. Once we know that, we need to also know how much is that waste stream going to increase every year? And how much do we hope to add that we're extracting out of that waste stream each year? That may be a double combo. Maybe it's 10% is going to be added per year just in the waste stream on its own. And we're also going to try and take out 10% more every year.
Right.
And we need to plan that out for 10 or 20 years. So the facility cannot be based on today. It's got to be a 10 or 20 year facility based on what we think we could just go out and pull out today. And from there, then we know, can we go into automation? Those machines that they were describing in the beginning of this, Kinley, those are mind blowing. They're game changers. I've done this by hand, as you know.
Yep.
And it's I don't think it's sustainable, realistic, or scalable unless we have a workforce to, I think it's Sonia at Bill Green, to her point, we could train a workforce of disadvantaged individuals, people that want work, to be doing it by hand. I know that some of the C&D waste facilities, they use disadvantaged individuals and employ them and provide them a skill. And so there's lots of options, but really we have to have a foundational base starting point of how much material do we have access to, and those numbers are going to be astounding. I think you already know them, Kinley.
They are, yeah. 300,000 tons of clean wood is what we're looking at going through Seattle and King County per year. Actually, our most recent look looks like it might be more like 350,000 tons. And based on one study that we did at various transfer stations and other C&D collection spots around the county, we're guessing that's somewhere around 70 to 80%. Does that sound right, Alex? Of the clean wood that's out there, of that 300,000 tons, is probably worth processing. So yeah, it's a fair amount of material.
Well, and
ahead.
go ahead, Valerie.
Well, I was just going to say, I think when people are talking about space and warehousing and all that sort of stuff, I think unfortunately, what gets blurred together too much is like the soup to nuts aspect of this, right? So an urban collection area makes a lot of sense because it's centralized. And there's going to be a lot of stuff coming in, like no construction site is ever going to hand sort their usable 2x4s from their offcuts from the plot. They won't. So it's got to be a place that just accepts all wood from construction waste. The manufacturing doesn't have to be located there, right? Because there's going to be a lot of material that is still residual, still probably needs to get ground up for hog fuel. And so, why try and co-locate manufacturing when each outlet of manufacturing might only take up 15% of the wood that you're taking in, right? So they can be located in a more rural or semi-rural, semi-urban area that has larger spaces, cheaper rent, so on and so forth. And then that becomes a centralized distribution point for their finished products, right? Like Ferris Brothers is not going to locate in downtown Seattle, right?
Yeah.
But, a CLT, other mass timber producer might only be 45 minutes away or an hour away, and that makes sense. I also feel like, and a lot of you hear me beat this drum a lot, partnering between deconstruction, salvage, and old growth, as well as new construction wood waste, creates that kind of synergy and that kind of partnership that brings both of those material streams forward and allows a much more consistent access, I guess. Taking the model of us partnering, Sankofa partnering with Sustainable Northwest Wood, it would make no sense for me to try and recreate a sustainable retail wood outlet. Like they already do that.
Right.
And I don't need to double up on the space. I don't need to double up on the staff. Let them do what they do well. I do what I do well. Also didn't try and start a hauling company. There are plenty of haulers out there. So there's a, maybe not a fine line, but there's definitely a gray area of where different synergies make sense in terms of co-locating and where they don't. I think that needs to be part of any sort of analysis of like figuring out how to make this happen at scale.
Yeah,
I'll also add the fact that I prefer the fact that this is very labor intensive for a lot of different reasons. Great training opportunity. I never want somebody to park their butt here for 5 years at like a low end physical job. Like I want them to learn enough skills to get hired away, essentially. And a lot of that workforce is needed. So I would rather, instead of having like millions of dollars worth of machinery, have millions of dollars worth of jobs. It also makes the operation a lot more nimble so that you don't have to plan 20 years out. You can scale as you grow. It's not hard to move a grinder. It's not hard to move lumber racks, right? Those are not location specific. And they're pretty ubiquitous. Like you can add more. It's very modular in terms of that growth opportunity.
So how about the QC aspect of this all? I mean, that's one of the things, like, Eric's equipment has a lot of different kinds of sensors in it. And it seems like we're going to have a pretty high level of confidence if we're going to be trying to get wood into some of these engineered wood products in order to meet the ASTMs and the other, certifications that are going to happen.
That circles back to a question that came up early in chat and I don't think ever got addressed. The
Okay.
question was, why are we focusing mostly on CLT and finger joining as opposed to more mechanical methods like dowel lamination or nail lamination for these larger sort of quote unquote engineered, more mass timber scale? The first presentation on dowel lamination was really interesting in that it seems like that is something that could then also be disassembled down the road. Glue is a salvager's nightmare.
Yep.
If you got glue in there, that's just what it is, and it's not going to be anything else. But if you can take things apart relatively easy, it also means that you can employ more people in the production of those things because you're not operating super fancy high-end CAD equipment. It's like literally you can have people nail laminating lumber like on on like sawhorses, So anyway, I was curious about the answer to that question with that focus. What was driving that focus?
It's just kind of where we started, I guess, is the simplest answer.
I mean, to piggyback on that thought, it's like, there's so much opportunity in like the single family housing market just to replace virgin lumber in framing with the 2x4s that we can salvage. It seems like that almost should be like the first step versus trying to get these advanced uses through ASTM testing and having automated machines for pulling nails totally makes sense. But it's, if that's more of a future use, I feel like the low hanging fruit is, can we just get that lumber from one house as a framing component to another house as a framing component? And we already have builders hesitant to do that in the first place, not
Right.
because they don't maybe trust the material, but because it's just harder to get. You have to, kind of piece together your lumber packages. It may not be a cheaper alternative. There's so many reasons they'll give. And so if we're struggling just to get the simple swap out, for them to do that, I feel like that's where we should focus on first. And then, as we build the demand for more of this salvage wood, or at the same time, maybe it's anything that just would be chipped. Yeah, you can, explore the other options and opportunities to use that material in a different application. But things that can be simply framing to framing, that's feels like the low-hanging fruit to aim for first and doesn't require as much infrastructure.
Yeah, I would say that I spent 10 or 12 years talking about that with people, and Sledge has been able to make it work. But most of the time when I've been talking with different people about it, they say that like when you're doing deconstruction, the amount of 2x4s that you can get that are directly reusable is pretty small just because of the end nailing. So right there, you're going to a stud that's shorter than is needed. So that was one of the reasons we started looking at what could be done with shorter pieces.
Okay.
And then the other issue, it's addressed when you're going from one building to another and you're primarily using one building stock of wood. But so often when a contractor is trying to build with salvage wood, they've got wood from different houses with different densities. And that's what I hear is the biggest problem with their framing crews, is having to constantly change the tension on their nailing guns. And so that was one of the things that led us to looking at the remote sensing, looking at equipment that uses sonic testing and magnetic, imaging to try to figure out what the density and the different properties are the boards are, so that they could be categorized according to their properties. So you could put a package together that might come from 3 or 4 different houses, but all of the wood of similar density would be going together. But that, it gets complicated, right? And it
Yeah,
doesn't
and
really
that
work.
and that makes sense. And I just hadn't heard that before. So thank you for explaining it.
Yeah. And it's, there are people out there that can do visual grading of wood. And
That's what we've done for years. It's the visual grading. It's an education that you learn over the years. It's lost art, because when you're in a reman mill, you're taking what's lowest grade out of mills and remanning it to the best quality. And that's where you have quality people learning that skill. And that's what that program, what I want to develop is an education program. It's not reinvent, it's just reinstituting some of these little things that would help being developed from the time it's dropped off to the time that person looks at it, to be graded, to be sorted, so it's going into the right way it's going to be broken down into. And that density and those types of things can all get worked out with a little bit of, education.
Well, and then maybe it's not framing to framing, but also like some less processed applications, like remilling it into site, maybe engineered flooring pieces, or, I know Sustainable Woods does butcher block or
yeah.
paneling on interiors. Like, there's ways to remill like some of those framings that do have like the nails or the smaller pieces into reusable furniture, butcher blocks, etc.
Yeah.
That maybe it's like, okay, can we go framing to framing, but then also can we use, Sankofa does that with all their like smaller boards. They make a bunch of different products from that. And so can we kind of do those two low-hanging fruit of like less processing to also looking at the CLT, but trying to get those like much lower processing applications first and
Yep.
grow the market for like all these products.
Quick correction on that. All of our solid lumber goes into framing packages.
Oh, okay.
We don't reman it. And so anyone who hasn't framed a house, a lot of the wood that you use is also going to create rough openings for windows and doors, right? So that's a whole bunch of 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot pieces. Like Terry had shown in an example, pre-cut blocking. So one of our approaches is to start talking with folks that do a lot of pre-cut lumber packages for on-site construction, so that they're not necessarily panelizing, or they could be panelizing, but they know on a standard build out that they're going to need 400 39-inch, pieces for rough opening windows, and when you get to that scale of volume, it actually starts to make sense. The home DIY guy, they're not gonna try and pick up 50 or 60 pre-cut blocks. But if you're using a couple thousand on a 5/1 mixed use building, then that actually does make quite a bit of sense. It's more about educating the market than like not trying to chase after different solutions.
Yeah.
Talk about educating the market. One of the things that you said earlier, Valerie, is something that I've been using in a lot of my talks. And I've noticed that this is still being liberally used at waste and recycling conferences. The idea of recycling wood groups in some of the lowest and most, in my mind, horrific uses, like hog fuel. It's taking embodied carbon and chipping it up and burning it to fuel paper plants and things like that. And it's a very large percentage, at least in certain areas that I've been hearing about. Has there been any discussion, Henley, maybe I'll turn this to you. Has there been any discussion about languaging around the term recycled wood and making it very clear what is not recycling wood?
Yeah, we've been working with that at King County. We don't term it as recycled wood, it does get counted as diversion and it gets counted as beneficial use, which are two other terms that are still needing to be defined. But there's a lot more work that needs to be done on that. And I think probably some definitions need to get changed at the state level, at least in Washington. Colin?
Yeah, I've really wanted to have a sort of definition of recycling that gets to the quality of that recycling. So if you're able to put it into something, it's about what you're able to displace, isn't it? Like if the thing that you're displacing is otherwise really low impact, then that's yeah, you know, doing agricultural paths and animal bedding and things like this is, you know, you could use pretty much any timber for that. So then to come around from that to say, in defense of processing timber to make CLT, although we're not at this point yet, if you can make a layered product and use the homogenizing effect of having multiple layers so that you then have something that displaces structural steel or concrete, then yes, there's more processing involved. That's more of a challenging thing to get right and get people to agree with, but in the end the wins could be bigger. So I agree, like where timber can just be directly reused, brilliant, but I think we see the same issues around shorter lengths and smaller reusable sections, and it feels like in the UK construction industry, trying to make a product that is like resembles as nearly as possible a new product in like new CLT, then you're more likely to get that accepted than trying to convince our contractors to work with recovered timber as it comes.
I wanted to add to that, like we talked about mass timber, we talked about CLT. Now CLT is 99% wood, but that 1% glue makes it non-recyclable. We didn't talk about DLT, dowel laminated timber, which is 100% wood that Eric Haler from Intronic is working on. And I think it's a very attractive proposition that we have aggregated toxin-free pure wood from a century ago into 100% wood wall, which would now auction off for a premium to be your ceiling or roofing piece that's labor saving, as well as like a piece of art. And also the floor for the next level without having, framers do awkward jobs. That's labor saving, back saving, ideal product. But now that kind of goes with, the 300,000 tons that comes out to really think about the short lengths. And DLT allows you to aggregate it to quite a high level. And that's a very innovative space. Now for DLT, they can't compete with the suppliers of CLT. So CLT is not going to show up on these places, but I could bring all the DLT producers to this. So it's about where do we toot our horn? And like there's very few people in this space, but I really think that to go purer to 100% wood would really throw away the inhibition of toxic wood or painted wood or leaded wood. Mm-hmm. And that would be really purposeful.
Syed, this is Jeff. I have a quick question. Is there any form of adhesives that would be still considered safe if the DLT wasn't as well accepted or easy to implement? In other words, glues that turn out to be non-toxic or are able to become part of the second reuse.
My understanding is that there are CLT adhesives out there that are red list free. So they're essentially considered non-toxic at this point. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I know there's people working on it. But you still have the issue that it makes in 200 years when the building comes apart, it does make the panels harder to work with, harder to reuse. That's one of the advantages for sure with DLT.
I grapple with this sort of, I don't know, Achilles heel to CLT quite a lot because, I'd love the idea of a 100% wood panel and talk about Brettstapel and ways to do what some of the presenters today were looking at with DLT, but and it's true from my search of adhesives, there's nothing that meets the European standards, which doesn't have some level of toxicity and undesirability. But I tend to think of when we're designing new CLT and what UK CLT, my company would do, our approach to it would be to think of these as durable technical components in a circular economy, not biological components that are going to break down and re-release their toxicity. So you go about the whole design of the panel to try to make it demountable, reusable, get multiple lives out of it. And therefore you don't mind so much that it's all glued together, because that's not going to be it's a long time in the future that that becomes something that has to be dealt with. Not ideal, but it's kind of means to an end.
I think it was ZGF architects that I was speaking with, where they're looking as part of their end of life use in their design approach for CLTs and other like MPP, other mass timber of that nature, of that scale, that when they actually receive it and doing it or routing or cutting, that they're also putting a QR code or some other label on it that describes the species, the manufacturer, the stress test rating that it was produced with, the adhesives that were used, and essentially just having a directory of materials that go along with the building. So when it is disassembled, we know on this floor, this beam was X, Y, or Z. And then you can plan when that building comes down. That's not an overnight process. So you already know what you have in the building. You can start designing for those specific timbers to be reused in a different building, even if they're over-engineered. If you know what you're working with, I've talked with some builders. They're like, if we knew that you had 4x8s, but we were calling out for 4x6, we would have taken the 4x8s. We would have loved that, but they didn't know I had it on hand. So their design limited them to 4x6s in the end run. So there's a little bit of advanced communication, I think, that can happen, especially at these larger scales. And I got to jump on another call, but it has been great chatting with y'all. Thanks for putting this together, Kinley and Alex.
Yeah, thanks,
and I
Valerie.
look forward to saving all our trees.
All right, catch you later.
Take care.
Bye, Valerie.
That was an EPD Valerie was describing.
I don't think so. I think she was talking about practices at CGF.
Yeah, I think she was talking about ZGF is their what's it called, upstream calculator, which they're still working on. I'm not sure what the status is, if it's public yet.
Yeah.
Was anyone at the presentation at the Passive House Panelized Summit that happened in the last year? There was a European presenter. I wish I could remember which city they were focused on, but they were talking about inventorying at a citywide level components of buildings. So that, and that was not just wood focused, but it was, it seemed like a Herculean effort, but they kept saying, look, we have the technology to do this, a la the QR code that Valerie was just talking about. It was an impressive presentation. I remember thinking, wow, if design communities were actually thinking of the city as a store to design from, right? Like, these are my components. I already know where they all are. I can even consider distance of transport or adjacencies when thinking of deconstruction of those buildings, and you start planning your next construction based on the inventory of what's in the city and is coming down soon.
Yep. And
one cool store.
Yeah, cities are big stores. Barbara Lambic, I think, spoke on that when she was in Seattle a few months ago. She's doing her
maybe it was
her master thesis on I'm looking at cities as banks essentially for materials. I think she's focused, her research is focused on Zurich, I think was where she was focusing it, but she traveled around the US gathering additional information. But yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
piece of the pie.
There's a woman from France and she's visiting Portland as we speak, Matilda Billette, I think it is, and I'm going to be meeting with her. She's worked with Bellistock, which might have been who talked about the building inventories, like inventorying buildings. I think that's one of the things they worked on. So we did that in Indianapolis when they had over 1,000 structures that they were tearing down, and that's the step that we took. We inventoried the structures because they had them generally in order of when they were going to tear them down. So we didn't inventory the ones that were like in the next 3 months. We went and started inventorying them farther out, and so that we could start matching supply and demand, because it was such a massive amount, unbelievable amount of material. You couldn't even believe it, But if somebody had a need for wood flooring, we would know what building to go into to find that after doing the inventory. It's kind of interesting process.
So how much do we need warehousing and how much do we need the logistics of just being able to extract and get them into new buildings?
I mean, we've been talking for years, Kinley, many of us, right, about the need for dry local warehousing, covered local warehousing in order to make it viable. I would say if Valerie were still on the call, she'd say warehousing was one of the most key critical components for making their Portland operations viable. And I think the partnership with an entity that could provide virgin lumber in combination with her salvaged lumber to make aggregated packages, where she was missing longer lengths, that the warehouse and the partnership and ultimately the shipping logistics were all needed in just using that as a case study, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're not a huge endeavor, but even a small partnership required those things. Is there such thing as a full inventory enough to be able to do just-in-time manufacturing of a building, sort of lean processing across the city or across the county? I think it's worth going at that, continuing to inventory. But for now, it seems like covered warehousing with sorting and some level of grading in that sorting, at least species identification or density identification or something,
right,
appears to me to be critical. I have belief in what Sankofa is doing. We do, single family homes one at a time for the most part, and just getting enough of the right pieces at the right time to do one single family home is a lot of conversations. It's no small endeavor, but it's doable. We're on home number 2 soon.
So it takes a lot of your time and a lot of dedication, right?
Yeah, belief in it, right?
Yeah.
I'll add on to that, Kinley. In Sledge, when I helped with that, we started this concept that Jim wanted to do called 1 for 1. Tear down one structure, build one whole structure. And we started with tiny houses. And we built 3 of them. And then we moved to Dadu's and we built 3 of them. And along the way, we were able to use a lot of our material. This is pre-40 structures. There is kind of a classification and a splitting point for the types of materials that can be harvested out of these structures. Some of it has to do with scale of the structure. If it's a commercial structure, an old grocery store has a ton of timber in it. An old house has a little bit of timber in it. Jim also coined the term urban forestry. Just what you're talking about, that the city's a store. Each one of these structures is a small forest. And so being able to see that and realize that we really, especially as applied to Seattle and King County, definitely need to work on our definitions, work on exactly what our goals are. Are we going for scale? Or are we just going for a shotgun effect and pulling material and using it as many ways as possible? I think it's not, a lot of times you got to crawl before you walk before you run.
Right.
But in this particular instance, there is a chance that we may be able to start off running if we pick the right goals. And if it's scale, then homogenization of materials, being able to have material go through, whether it is hand processing or if it is through AI robotics processing, and just process mountains of material into homogenized pallets, homogenized truckloads, homogenized trailer loads. That's probably the most reasonable, realistic goal that we have, because we have so much material available to us.
Yep.
It's an amazing goal that we have, and I think many of us came here. 200 people sounds like internationally see the same things. I think between all of us who attended things like this and attend other things, we have great possibilities to collaborate and come up with stuff. But we do need to figure out and start to hone down what are our definitions and what are our goals.
Can I just share 2 quick examples of financially viable salvage business I've noticed?
Yeah.
Like, one is that I find salvage homes from Detroit, that wood shows up in Northern California and goes into the fine homes in California.
Huh.
Right? So no distance, no carbon footprint, no requirement. It's happening because it's economically feasible. Right? So we need to find where that rift is. The second one I found really big, and is a homogenization and thinking in components that'll get reused, was the rural producer. He takes straight up logs and makes DLT out of the side pieces, and the cores get sold as lumber. And but you could call him up and say, yeah, I need my roof, in 2 weeks from now. And 2 weeks arrive, it's raining. He's like, yeah, can you push it back a day? He'll come with this crane, and when your walls are ready, he'll pop the roof and you go on constructing. And he can deliver to Munich and Stuttgart within a few hours. So thinking about geographies like that, like I can just totally imagine King County roofs, DLT 100%, and people be bidding on it, out of their apps, and they know exact sizes. They come in 4x16, 8x24, there's panelized sizes of it. And I know it's kind of going a little far, but the amount of volume of wood that there exists, there has to be some higher value product that's very desirable because people can afford it. And it can feed more projects and more things to get recycled and expand. But those 2 things are like happening commercially. And I'm sure we're stumbling upon a few as we speak here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be curious if you could send us more information on those 2 examples that you gave. That would be great.
Well, and I can't help but step in here and say that if anybody wants to go to nickelbros.com and go to houses for sale, you will see that we use every bit of the house from the floor joists and up, and we don't even change their form. So even though it's not directly wood recycling, it is pretty much highest and best use. Yeah, but yeah.
Very cool.
So if King County were to apply for one of the EPA solid waste infrastructure grants, what should they ask for?
Infrastructure, right?
Yep.
That's like the first question.
Yep. Start with a warehouse and get fancier from there.
But is there a possibility of asking neighboring counties if they have derelict building that's more suitable, or is there buildings? Because King County is really populated, right? I mean, the economics of that is none of these places are within a few hours of a city, that I'm talking about. They're all 3-4 hours outside the main city.
Okay.
wherever it's chosen, is there a possibility of doing a demonstration project where we end up working together to rehab whatever that is, the warehouse or whatever, just to prove that there are direct uses of our various industries that we're trying to foster?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let me make a note of that one.
There's also the USDA, the wood that was burnt in the forest fires being removed. They'll be removed over the next few years, and that's coming online. So if that's being reused towards DLT, that may go into the same machine. How about that, right? Because you may have all those other challenges, and now you can have a federal and a state program come along.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, well, I'm working with California with the governor's office right now. And what they're doing is something like with that reclaiming wood aspect, but they're doing it on residential properties in all forest areas from the fires and everything. They're not being able to get insurance or even transfer ownerships and everything. And so what they've designed is they've designed a 3D image by drones and such through Cal Poly, Humboldt State, Davis. And what they're going to do is build a forum where they're going to go online, you're going to choose the trees to get out, and you're going to get paid instead of paying a tree service to come in and thousands of dollars to take the trees off. And then this forum, basically this storefront, will give you insurance. So those logs are coming out, and I just partnered up with a log mill. And so they want to redevelop all small log mills because those trees are so big that bigger mills can't take them because they're only doing 24 or 26 diameter log. So there's projects like that are developing, and it's the whole state of California that's doing it. And so they came to me. They found me through the online lumber store. So I have a salvage lumber warehouse store, and then I've got a reman storefront. So that point is trying to basically get it to an end use kind of thing. So we could that your beams and all that stuff can definitely be a part of. You could have a salvage and a remand material, which I like to use, say, reclaim from the forest.
Well, any other thoughts for today? I'm running out of good questions.
It's a great session.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks to Alex for encouraging me to still get on, even though I couldn't get the link to work for an hour.
Shoot. Well, I'm glad
Thanks,
you made it
guys.
for part of it.
Good to see some of you. I like the ideas that I'm hearing that are new to the conversation, such as DLT. You know, I think we need the logistics. We probably have the smart minds and the technology to put the information in place.
Right.
Because information and physical storage is enough for Amazon to conquer the world. Like, I'm not sure it isn't enough to get information and storage and logistics to come together.
The thing is, the volume of consumption of the material that'll come out has to be standardized and has to be very high volume, which is very unlike building. The only thing that fits in that is the granny flat, the ADU, about 600 square feet. And that doesn't require zoning exemptions. It's an as of right in California, became as of right in Ontario. And like, we spent all our time waiting for that to come through. But now it's not that we have to just supply 100,000 backyards in Toronto. There's 1 million backyards in Ontario. And if you worked with every neighboring state in the US, we still couldn't deliver it in the next decade. So
it's a fine point. Just the state of Washington has more or less codified. They haven't passed it yet, but they're about to codify the de-single familyization of Washington State,
Yeah.
right? It's gonna be right by right that you can go to 4 units per property, and that'll take several forms. It could be cottages, backyard cottages. Small buildings are gonna be fairly common just due to geometric constraints. I think you're right on to think that that's a track we should be thinking about.
Because the thing is, if you get to build a granny flat today, the force house is very contentious. It'll change the neighborhood character and it becomes political. But the granny flat people can't do against because we just had COVID. We need to take care of our seniors. We're living in 3 generations. It's already bought in. It wasn't bought in 20 years ago. And I've been working on it for 10. So the fourplex, I think, is another 20 years away to become normalized. It'll happen in certain places like Seattle, Vancouver, and so forth, Toronto, San Francisco. But for mainstream to catch on, it'll be far. But granny flats will happen every part of America. It doesn't make a difference if you're in rural Pennsylvania or you're living in Texas. You will follow through because there'll be federal support around it. And like we also went to it, like house is not a product. House is a financialized item you buy. You buy a mortgage that allows you to buy a house, right? So we went backwards and we studied how Australia did it. They did a whole federal report on how people can have a granny flat interest amongst their families without making it too cumbersome. So there is a financialization of it, but I'm really excited that how a senior could be attracted to go to 100% wood DLT to retire into with 0 toxins that lowers their heart rate. You're not going to get the same convincing thing by converting a garage or convince them in a quadplex. You know, it's on the ground is the last time you'll build a single detached type of structure in the city or wherever they are. And it'll be the most premium product that they can have. And it could be coming straight from salvaged lumber.
Yeah, I love it. I've got 2 developments that I'm ready to do that on as soon as you can financialize that for me.
Well, Seattle was the first city I started to visit to see the best examples 10 years ago. And it's wonderful to see that the conversation's coming back. Now I'll deliver on it with DLT from King County. So thank you.
Cool.
How do I get a hold of you?
I think I just sent you a thing on LinkedIn.
Okay, great.
Nice. Mark, did you have something you were going to say earlier? I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, thank you, Kenley. So I'm Mark Mandel and own Pacific Northwest Timbers in Port Townsend and Crossroads Recycled Lumber, which started in Bellingham in '93, right about when Dave Bennick started the Restore. But anyway, we've been doing this for 40 years, buying all the timber out of commercial buildings. We just got 35 loads out of Terminal 106 in Seattle. The interesting thing was that the demo contractor didn't have a place to go to with the glue lamps, so we didn't want the lamps, and they sent rail car loads to a landfill. I'm not sure where the landfill was. I didn't get that information, but there's still a huge amount of worthwhile salvageable wood that goes to landfills. And I started this back in '93 when I saw some buildings being crushed and the demo guys were crunching and running over 30-foot 12 by 12s and taking them to the landfill. And I thought, I know somebody wants that. So we've been resawing wood with these 2 companies for 40 some years. I heard talk about contaminants in glue, but there's ways you can reuse these glue lamps. And there was a guy in Forks, John Hunt, started Retech Woodworks in '95 or so. And all he did was resaw glue lamps for flooring. And then, I don't know about the toxicity of the glue in the wood, but once you finish a floor and it's covered up, I don't think it would be an issue. So we've looked for places to go with glue lamps and haven't really developed much of a market. So our market is solid timbers and reclaimed flooring. But Kinley, if there was some kind of mandate by government agencies like King County Solid Waste that a certain percentage of the wood had to be recycled, even for cogen, in my opinion, it's better to use it for something than just to landfill it. You could still be getting a huge amount more wood into the useful stream. And one more thing, talking about warehouses, we got 5 warehouses from Oakland Army Base, and we've gotten many warehouses from military bases over the years. And some of these buildings were 9 acres under one roof. And if you could just, yeah, millions and millions and millions of board feet could be stored in there. So at one end, you could have the raw materials coming in, have a processing with Eric Law, urban machines, nail pullers, and I'll try not to go on too long, but just a footnote here, with that nail puller, you're going to have a human recheck everything. Been doing this for so long, and the nail pulling with broken off nails, screws, staples, pieces of brackets, bullets in the wood that you can't even see. There's a huge amount of labor in pulling, but that machine should get the most of it, and then you have a human being check it and make sure it's all clean. But what I'm getting at, with 350,000 tons a year, is that what you said, Kinley?
Yep.
Nationwide?
No, it's Seattle and King County.
Just Seattle and King County.
Yep.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So if somebody could even start working on getting a building around Seattle from the port or McCord or someplace, you could start putting wood in there and figure out how in the world to process it, rather than like these train loads going to landfill from Terminal 106. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of good points there, Mark.
I've never heard the military campus suggestion. That's a good one. Talk about
really
scale.
good one. That's probably the best, biggest, widest spaces available.
Yeah.
And they're probably logistically good for getting to water and transport.
Oh yeah.
And my name is Jeff McCord, and I have an inside track to McCord Air Force Base. So
if only. All right. Well, it's been a great session for today. Thanks for hanging out with us today. And I'm going to try to make sense of all the notes and chat and everything else we've got and review this recording again. And we've got 2 weeks to come up with a grant proposal to the EPA if we want to try to move forward with that. So we'll see how that goes. I know City of Seattle's putting something together, and I'll be coordinating with Katie on that. But stay tuned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Alex, everybody, great conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.